Our show's what you know. We'll always watch TV. And if you think we can't, we'll watch more and you'll see. That's why the people of the web believe in Jim from Las Vegas and Jakob from Sweden.
Come one, come all, shows what you know, your television podcast. I am Jim from Las Vegas, and across the world we have...
Jakob from Sweden, a title that's actually accurate this time around. Most of the time I'm broadcasting out of the Republic of Ireland, but this time I am in the Kingdom of Sweden, the country of my birth. And I'm doing sort of a casual, cozy vibe here, because I realized if I was in my other room, you probably wouldn't be able to hear shit because the internet wasn't so good. So we're doing a casual sort of couch hang here in the kitchen. And I might even do active track on my camera and walk around. You can see you can see my tap, my shitty fridge. You can see all of this at youtube.com/showswhatyouknow.
Well, if you're in Sweden, you're talking about like cozy vibes. Wouldn't that be Hygge? Hygge
is a Danish concept, I believe. To be honest, it's close enough. It's not one of those things I'm going to fight you over like everything else to do with the Danes. So, it's a similar type of setup, all right. I have... I'm in my family home, which actually the big conspiracy board from our Westworld recordings from, 6 years ago or whatever is just over in the other room. So I might do some more work on that later. We might finally crack the case, Jim.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I mean, we only know about that from IKEA, and as far as we're concerned, everything IKEA is Swedish. So, but anyways, moving on. This is a television podcast. We will be breaking down a little bit of TV news, some current events, if you will. We'll also get into a little bit of what you've been watching, which will lead us into a discussion. We've both watched the newest season of The Boys, the Amazon Prime original / based on a comic. Season 4 just premiered with 3 episodes. So let's get down to it. What's going on in the news? Jakob, let me tell you something here. In a show, to me, that is so now, it's so 2024. Speaking of Amazon as well, Amazon MGM Studios, they've given a pilot order for a show called The NIGHTBEAST, a horror comedy starring Tatiana Maslany, who you may know as She-Hulk or most famously Orphan Black. I guess probably more famously Orphan Black. What do you think's the bigger, higher profile that if you brought this name up, you'd be like, oh, She-Hulk or oh, Orphan Black?
Well, She-Hulk I never watched, but Orphan Black I enjoyed, but it was so long ago that it's in such a fog, but it's almost long enough ago that I'm like, I vaguely remember liking that, so I will pay attention. Versus, it's the girl from She-Hulk. I'm like, okay, cool, I don't give a shit.
So the official logline, quote, a young mother unsatisfied with her seemingly perfect suburban life begins an affair with the boogeyman in her son's closet. A surprisingly sexy man called the NIGHTBEAST, but this harmless affair she thought to be a figment of her imagination begins to have unexpected consequences as her two worlds increasingly begin to collide in this seductive, darkly comedic tale. Now, Jakob, this sounds like a fan fiction from Archive of Our Own, which I'm not saying it in a bad way, but that's to me why it just spells this is so very now. What do you think?
Well, maybe that's why I like it, if it sounds like a fanfic from Archive of Our Own. But I guess if it's a horror comedy, I did enjoy the logline you shared with me earlier, and I started laughing. But if it's a horror comedy, maybe it's kind of a parody or a take on all of the sort of romancing monster genre, your Twilights and your million other versions of that. There's a romance book for fucking an angel, fucking a golem. They're all out there, and it's a thriving genre still. So maybe it's kind of a take on that, because it sounds sexy, first of all, sexy concept to start with, but then it might also be kind of poking fun at some of those things. I don't know. I like it as an idea anyway.
I wonder. It reminds me a little bit of a show that I may talk a bit about in what you've been watching. It's the recent Netflix release, Eric, which that one entails like a Jim Henson type, like a puppeteer type person with Muppets, and his son goes missing, and he starts seeing and talking to this big Muppet that his son designed. So it's like, I don't know, like I'm not saying this is a bad thing, but we're kind of obsessed with this. Like, I love when you mix genres, but I feel like it's been like a running thing of like working in these, I don't know, these like flights of fantasy with grounded, gritty topics. But the tough thing is I feel like it's becoming like a little bit too overdone and not always to great success. Looking at their, seeing what else the creators have written. I've never heard of this TV series Chambers, but a few episodes of Chambers, another Netflix show. A woman survives a heart transplant and begins to develop different personality traits. It's so funny when you read. I'm sure, like, I can't say if the show's good or bad, but it's so funny when you read like a log line of a show and you're like, oh yeah, that's this meets this, or you can almost like just see it.
None of them sound good.
Yeah,
you know, no TV shows sound good when you describe them. It's all in the execution.
There's a podcast called Day by Day, a series about, looks like it was about quarantine. Podcast series of inspired by our new normal.
Cool.
Yeah. So I don't know. We'll see. I just think it's kind of funny that it is like, you know, the Beauty and the Beast, but like the Dark Beast just happens to be the boogeyman in your son's closet. I mean, the fan fiction just writes itself. I could just picture a hunky guy who's also maybe to children looks like a ferocious monster, or maybe is some sort of werewolf that also turns into a hunky guy. Who knows? I'm excited to see where it goes.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. But Jim, I would feel that way if it didn't say like horror comedy, right? If it's just like spooky romance, I'm like, okay, great, we get another spooky romance. But I'm like, okay, there's definitely a lot you could do there, so maybe they will. But this is early days, right? We don't really know when this is coming out.
Yeah, or if even it could be one of those, like, remember we used to, I don't know if Amazon still does this, but we used to watch they would release pilots and like let viewers vote on them. And we watched a few that I don't think I was going to say they didn't go anywhere, but as far as I know, they're on their like 6th season, and I've never heard of them.
Like
but
8 seasons of The Tick, which was one of the shows. Jean-Claude Van Damme, they made, there was a play on words there. He was like a secret agent or whatever. This is all at showswhatyouknow.com. If you go back to when Prime was originally starting to make shows, but I think they reached the point where they were like, oh, wait a minute. Sorry, why were we asking you? We have all of your data. We know what you want more than you do. Why would we let you vote? There's no democracy under surveillance capitalism. You'll take whatever slop we bring you. Here's a fucking... You want to fuck the bogeyman. I just know it from looking at your fucking search record. So that's where we're at now.
Yeah, and moving on, and then this is more so... I didn't realize this was even a thing. But at the Tribeca Film Festival, they did premiere a Sopranos documentary, which is coming to HBO, although it doesn't really list a date yet. But it's called Wiseguy, David Chase and The Sopranos. It played to a packed audience at the Beacon Theater, 2 hours and 40 minutes. Although when they described the opening, I rolled my eyes a bit, and I'm surprised David Chase even did this. The documentary begins with The Sopranos opening credit sequence driving into New Jersey. But this time, the show's creator and showrunner, David Chase sits in the car. It's like, oh, okay. I feel like David Chase would be like, fuck that. What are you doing?
Yeah, what is this, a fucking Honda ad?
Now,
what I'm most...
Oh, yeah, that's right. The Super Bowl ad. I forgot about that. Yeah. I'm most interested to see, like, not to pat ourselves on the back, but I feel like we're in the realm of Sopranos experts. We did a podcast. We discussed every single episode of The Sopranos. We cited some of the major books and interviews that got into different motivations and discussions for different characters and how storylines played out and generally how the show did. I'm not saying we're the be-all, end-all, but I think we're pretty well-versed. And especially in this day and age, I mean... If you didn't know, we bring this up a lot, but we just beat out the Talking Sopranos podcast, which debuted with...
That's right. We have higher numbers than them. We just beat them out.
Yeah, that's not what I meant. What I meant is we finished just as that started, which is such a good... Because, I mean, I loved doing that podcast. I feel like it was a great experience for both Jakob and myself. Jakob was the first time watching it. I had already seen it, but hadn't seen it in quite a long time. I thought it gave us some great discussions, both with insider stuff that we could find from our own research, but just our own reads on the show. But yes, it would not have happened if we had that discussion a couple years later and there was already this Talking Sopranos podcast. It was almost like, what's the point? But then again, it feels like more, since that podcast was so big, like what more can you really say about The Sopranos? I'm just interested to think if this 2.5 hour documentary, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of stuff we've heard, but like, is there more to delve into here that whether it be us who did our own podcast or just people that really love Talking Sopranos and probably listen to every episode of that, which was hosted by 2 stars of the show and did have regular guests between writers and directors on discussing specific episodes.
Yeah, I mean, the only Sopranos documentary you really need is obviously Cut to Black, a Sopranos sit down.
Very true.
But I feel like these types of documentaries, it's rare that any doc about media or about sports or about a thing that is popular, it's rare that they come out with any big revelations, if we're being honest. It's usually like, hey, you like this thing, let's spend some hours talking about it. And we would be like, yeah, let's do that, because we just spent 100+ hours talking about it. So of course we're going to be on board. So who knows? I hope from the, what's the title again? Like Wiseguy, David Chase?
Yeah, Wiseguy, David Chase, and The Sopranos. And
I think that leans to me that it's like he's the wise guy, right? But not wise guy like a mobster, but like he's like a wise ass. He fucks with the audience. Maybe that's the take they're gonna take, because that's what we always got to talking about, how he loves giving the audience a big fuck you, and maybe there's something to that. I hope it's not just like, wise guys, let's learn about mobsters again. Like we know all these things.
Yeah, because I mean, at least speaking for myself, and I think for you as well, my favorite thing about David Chase is how David Chase has contempt for the audience, and even for like having to make a TV show, and that's why The Sopranos is so good. I'm looking at the director. It looks like he's involved in some other bigger documentaries I have heard of. There's one on Enron, The Smartest Guys in the Room, which I believe I watched. This is kind of old. He was a producer on Going Clear, which is like the Scientology documentary, which I have heard of, but I haven't seen. But like reading some of the stuff, it is a little eye-rolly between the intro, and they also mention that like there's an interview they recreated Dr. Melfi's office, but Chase is sitting in like the Tony seat. Like, I get you kind of got to do this, but it's also like, all right, we get it. It's like, oh, what if David Chase was Tony Soprano?
That's the stuff that makes you feel like there's not necessarily any substance to it. But I'm not going to judge it too soon. We're gonna probably do a Shows What You Know Cut to Black crossover.
That's
discuss it right here. Put it on the Cut to Black feed. Remind everyone that we exist, even though we talk about other shows now. Win-win for us.
Well, because even like they have a quote from Alex Gibney, who's like the guy interviewing him and he created the documentary, and his quote is like, "This is the GOAT of TV series." And I feel like if anything, David Chase is going to be like, huh? The GOAT? And what Chase says, it was so lucky to work with these guys, and I really saw it today what a family this is. This is at the reunion. If it wasn't for the word fuck, where would we be? I guess they do show some audition tapes for some real behind the scenes treat. I wonder if they're going to show other actors as Tony. They do get into a little bit about how like, I do like that Gibney tries to set up Chase of like, wow, your eyes must have lit up when you found Gandolfini to play Tony, and it's like Chase is not going to even pander to that story. He's like, no, that's not how it happened. Gandolfini didn't want to do it, and he didn't come to auditions, and it was tough. But yeah, I don't know. I'm excited to see it, but again, it probably will be a lot of stuff I know. I guess the balance is like, of course, it has to be for lack of a better term, the normies. When it comes to Sopranos, we're not necessarily normies, but you got to bring everyone in. You can't just assume everyone else has watched and discussed every episode and listened to full podcasts on each episode. But it's funny. Imperioli's quote is like, "Wow, the show is better than I remembered. With some distance, how thorough a production it was on every level of filmmaking. It's remarkable how fantastic it is, and how well it holds up over time. I guess that's something you would think about, something you worked on for like a decade, like kind of being surprised that it's good almost. But hey, that's his point. That's his point of view on it.
Yeah, I mean, he's still every episode of Talking Sopranos, he's like, "Whoa, what?" But he wrote some of it as well. You know, you think he was very involved. He was there, but then it was a long time ago as well. So I look forward to it. Of course, we will be discussing it right here at Shows What You Know. When is it coming out, Jim?
That's the thing. They just premiered it. In my experience, I can't find a premiere date yet. In my experience, they've done similar things with HBO documentaries at Sundance. Like I've watched them when I've done Sundance online, and usually within like a couple months they'll premiere. So I imagine probably by the end of the summer, but we'll see.
Looking forward to it. Great. Any more great news, Jim?
Yeah, this isn't really news. It's just a clickbait headline I've been seeing going around, and I wanted to talk about it. I mean, I guess to be fair, Daniel Radcliffe was asked this question apparently. I guess they mentioned that he's done some different voice roles for animated shows like The Simpsons, Robot Chicken, BoJack Horseman, Rick and Morty. But he's talking about how he can't sit through all this sort of heavy hour-long stuff, specifically like The Sopranos or Breaking Bad. He prefers to watch cartoons or reality TV. Honestly, I watch cartoons and I watch reality TV. It's like, hey, I love reality TV. I mean, this is me now speaking. I love reality TV. Don't get me wrong. I'm not really much of a cartoon person these days. I don't know what that is about, though. What do you think that's about, Jacob?
Your inner child has died, probably.
I've never seen Breaking Bad. I've never watched the Sopranos or The Wire. All this sort of heavy hour-long stuff, I just can't. I think it does probably in part stem from growing up on The Simpsons. I was watching Jeopardy the other night, and one of the contestants credited a ton of his trivia knowledge to The Simpsons. That's absolutely true of me as well. There are so many weird facts and things from my general knowledge of the world to my sense of humor that were formed in some way by The Simpsons. Which I kind of get. There are definitely things that I know of because of The Simpsons, like things that I laughed at and I didn't realize was like a goof on something else until way later. But I don't know if this doesn't necessarily constitute anti-intellectualism to me, but it's also kind of like, it almost has the air of like, I don't even own a TV. People, or I use the old adage used to be, I just watched the History Channel. I don't know if you used to hear that back in the days where people would be like, what TV was before its like peak TV days. It was always like cool to be like, well, I don't own a TV, or if I did, I just watched the History Channel.
I didn't hear people say that, but I probably heard someone say it on The Simpsons.
Yeah, very true. I think a lot of BoJack Horseman would be just too fucking bleak and sad if it wasn't a talking horse, Radcliffe said. The classic example is Homer strangling Bart in The Simpsons. In a live-action series, that's just like a horrendous act of child abuse that there's nothing funny about whatsoever. Whereas it's a running gag in The Simpsons, and it's funny because of what Bart's neck does. It makes sense that our generation of people that have grown up on The Simpsons would want to continue watching more adult-themed cartoons when they got older. I don't know.
Get him on the show. Get him on the show. He has to answer for this. No, who was it that was recently like, Marvel films are destroying cinema? I feel like Ridley Scott's probably said something like that. Or no, some big ass director. Ridley Scott's always saying shit. A lot of
Ridley
them are always
Scott
saying
says
shit.
that a lot. Martin Scorsese's attributed that with a lot, but he mostly just said like he usually when he talks about it, he's not as malicious as people make it seem. He just kind of says like, it's not really cinema to me, which I think is kind of fine. It's just funny that people get all up in arms about it.
But it's the same with this, right? Because he's not like, no one should watch Breaking Bad. Watch cartoons. And as he said, I don't think he brought it up, right? It's not like his podium. It's not like he's like, you know what? I got a beef with long-form television. Sounds more like he just got to chatting and he got carried away, making him a perfect guest for Shows What You Know. That's what we do.
Yeah, but there's something about this that makes me dislike him. I don't know why, and I usually like him. I think he's been pretty solid, and I saw like people have talked about recently how it's surprisingly how well adjusted he is as kind of one of the biggest child stars for a time, growing up being Harry Potter. You'd think he'd be like a derelict drug addict at this point, based off of past history, but he's, he does his own thing. He still picks kind of fun projects. He just won a Tony. I mean, hell, this guy's winning at life. Maybe it's because he doesn't watch The Sopranos or Breaking Bad.
Yeah, he just won a Tony for Merrily We Roll Along, which I've never heard of or don't know what it is.
Yeah.
So, we all have different interests, Daniel. I don't mind it. It's fine, I think. He can say what he wants.
Yeah, you know what, Daniel? I've never seen Merrily We Roll Along because I don't have hundreds of dollars to deck out of my pocket to go to a Broadway show. I'm too busy here with my schlepping Breaking Bad and Sopranos like a stupid pauper that I am.
Yeah, with your dumbass non-cartoon neck. You can't even ring it properly.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the only small piece of news I had is that House of the Dragon was actually renewed. Now, House of the Dragon, the first episode of Season 2, just came out right before we recorded this. Do you know who directed the episode?
Ooh, Daniel Radcliffe?
That'd be a fucking... Yeah, so fuck you, Jim. No, it was Alan Taylor who directed Many Saints of Newark and many Sopranos episodes.
Oh, yes, yes.
Very
nice.
There also a lot of Game of Thrones episodes. But yeah, the first episode just came out. But even before the first episode came out of Season 2, they've renewed it. They've renewed it for Season 3, showing a lot of enthusiasm and support for this fiery, bloody dragon show that they got over there at HBO. Or is it Max the place to go for HBO? Is that what it's called now?
Yeah, it's Max the one to watch for HBO. I mean, this is their money horse right now, or their money dragon, if you will. They got people kind of back in on Game of Thrones, even after everyone thought it sucked after it ended.
Well, Jim, you haven't watched it, but do you want to ask me a question, Jim? Do you want to ask me about this show and maybe what, is there a question?
I think apropos of your news headline,
what TV shows have you been watching? Tell me, I gotta know.
What TV show have you been watching, Jacob?
I have been watching House of the Dragon. Actually, I've been watching a lot of shit recently. We watched 3 episodes of The Boys, House of the Dragon, and of course, which would have been pretty easy to fit in all of that in just the last couple of days since they came out. But of course, I also had to watch Bridgerton Season 3, Part 2, which was also released. So I kind of had to prioritize Bridgerton, which meant I was, right before we recorded, I was like, Jim, can we delay this by like 30 minutes? No one's died in House of the Dragon yet, so the episode is nowhere near done yet. But I have now watched the first episode of House of the Dragon.
So, I mean, no spoilers, but does that mean the blood and cheese has happened? Is it blood and cheese? I keep seeing tweets about blood and cheese. They're like, blood and cheese is gonna put the Red Wedding to shame.
Yeah, that seems a bit hyperbolic. Yes, blood and cheese did happen. I didn't know that was what we were calling it, I guess, nor that it deserved a name, that it was that epic. But I guess, before I give my judgment on this app, let's do a little background here, because you didn't finish the first season. You started the first season of House of the Dragon, but you didn't finish it, right?
Correct, yeah. I don't know what it is. They just haven't really won me back, I feel. Like, I was already, before the ending of Game of Thrones, when I was rewatching it, I was already looking at it with different eyes. Like, I can't deny that it's still a very good show, but it was a way shakier still when I rewatched it. And then the ending was just kind of whatever. And then by the time this happened, I was just kind of like, I don't care who gets the Iron Throne. Like, it doesn't matter to me. And I think I think that's an important thing to want to watch this show. You need to want to know, like, do you care who gets the Iron Throne?
I care a little bit, but that's probably because I watched the 10 episodes and got to know the characters in that. But I was extremely wary at the start of season 1. I remember watching House of the Dragon and Rings of Power from Prime in parallel because they were coming out at the same time. It was 2022, the summer of 2022, the summer of dragons and fantasy and fucking hundreds of millions being spent on the small screen. And I started out thinking Rings of Power was actually better. I liked it more. And then House of the Dragon, I was like, meh, whatever. I'll keep watching. But House of the Dragon managed to do a successful slow build, and just generally it was more like the craftsmanship of the making of the television show that I was like, oh, every aspect or most of the aspects of how they put this together is just good. It just has good acting, it has good writing. Even if I didn't care at the start, I got to a point at the end where I did care. Now there's a problem with that it was 2 fucking years ago. So I started this episode and I'm like, who are these people again? What's happening?
Yeah.
I knew the main people, but as with the Game of Thrones OG, there's a lot of characters running around, right? So I was like, who's this guy again? What do I feel about this? Oh, who cut out that person's eye? A lot of that shit. But and this episode as well, it started, I don't think you would have enjoyed the way it started. It was kind of like sort of panning north. We see Winterfell. We see the Wall. There's a guy talking about the Night's Watch. And I was definitely like, man, fuck this shit. Why am I watching this? It's sort of that prequel dread where it feels like they're just pulling out the old faithfuls. Like, remember this? Remember the Wall? But as I said, the first season managed to do a successful sort of slow build that paid off, which is what Game of Thrones does at its finest. So I can't speak for this season yet, but I remember after the first episode, I wasn't blown away. I'm also not blown away right now, but that's honestly because like half the time I was like, let me look back into this character and let me remember what's happening. And by the end of it, it's like, okay. And they're only just setting the stage for the season anyway. I have more faith in their writing than in, Rings of Power or whatever. So I did enjoy the episode. Blood and cheese, I guessed it happened. Didn't know that was a thing until I was Googling it after. Didn't seem like that big of a thing to me. Seemed like standard Game of Thrones stuff, if I'm honest.
Well, I mean, I feel like we're gonna have very similar comments when we talk about The Boys because I just looked it up. That was another thing. It premiered in July of 2022. So yeah, it's been
season 3. You mean?
Yeah, season 3. So it's been 2 years, but I mean that's a different conversation. I think I watched 3 or 4 episodes of House of the Dragon. Although I only have 2 logged in my tracked.tv, but I feel like I watched more than 2. And I guess I could kind of see it, but I was just, I think at the time, I think I was also watching the Rings of Power, and I think I only got a few into that as well. And I was like, this is just too much for me. This is too much.
I don't know if I got to the maybe I lost the point, but the point was over time, Rings of Power just got worse and worse, and Game of Thrones House of the Dragon, whatever. It got better and better as it was actually using every episode to build on the previous one. Whereas in Rings of Power, I'm like, this seems to be going to something shitty. Is this gonna be is this gonna be dumb? And then it was. So not too excited about Rings of Power 2, but we got that coming up as well. I did enjoy the first episode. I'm looking forward to more of it, but I am not yet as engaged as I was at the end of last season. But honestly, that's the case with most shows.
Yeah. I mean, especially with the way these shows have these breaks, because there has to be this moment. I mean, unless like some people are smart or they just have tons of extra time where they're able to like rewatch the series to get ready for like the premiere. I love to do that when I can, but obviously it's not always something you could do. I think I was able to do it with like Better Call Saul when it was going to his last season, which was nice. But yeah, I mean, they can't really expect you to do that. So sometimes they do have to do some work to at least like get you back into the swing of things, But I feel like they don't do that much anymore because I guess they just assume like, hey, it's on demand. It's not like back in the day where you had to wait for a rerun or whatever. Like, as far as we're concerned, you might just be binging this years. This could be 10 years in the future. We're not going to waste time reintroducing characters because as far as we're concerned, you just watched the finale 5 seconds ago and now we're on to the next. So that's just kind of like the weird trade-off that happens with these shows. And that's
very
going
true.
back. Well, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think I did search for like recap of season 1,
Yeah.
and there was like one that's like, this is 20 minutes long, and it's from that account that I know does everything with a stupid AI voice, and I was like,
Yeah.
I guess I'll just breeze through the Wikipedia summaries.
Yep. Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say, too, because that's where I was trying to watch recaps of Pretty Little Liars' Original Sin, and it was all AI voices. And I don't think they were even getting details correct. So I was like, all right, that's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, super fun. I will be bringing you small updates of my sense of this show, and I'll give you at the end of the season, if not before, a strong pitch on you should definitely watch this versus it's fine. Like if you're not excited about the Iron Throne and the Wall and the dragons, don't watch it.
Yeah, because it's tough to not like just because I know where the Wall goes and I know where the Iron Throne goes. When I see them, I'm like, I don't care. Like, that's going to get knocked down. That's going to get melted. Like, so what? But I guess that's kind of the point. Like, oh, this power is but fleeting or... you know what I mean?
Jim, whoa.
Shit.
Did you pull a clip from season 2, episode 1 of House of the Dragon? I did have one other small piece of news. So, according at least to George R. R. Martin, a notorious source when it comes to these sorts of things, there's one of the Game of Thrones spin-offs has been sort of softly uncancelled. They were, writing a bunch of new ideas for spin-offs for Game of Thrones. They were like, how the fuck can we keep this shit going? And obviously House of the Dragon is the first big spin-off that they've done, but they had a bunch of other ideas.
One of them was a Jon Snow one. One of them was like the continuing adventures of Jon Snow. It was going to be written by Kit Harington, I believe, or he was going to co-write on it, but I'm almost positive they were like, we're not going to do that. They just silently canceled it.
Yeah, and I think they did the same to the one called 10,000 Ships. So that's one that's about Queen Nymeria that Arya's obsessed with. She was like bringing her people on a pilgrimage or sort of more sort of an escape, trying to find a new land, that sort of setup. So that hence the 10,000 ships as they're traveling across the world in search of a new home, to my understanding. Now, George R. R. Martin made a blog post saying that they've got a new writer attached to this, Bonnie Booth, who's apparently a Pulitzer Prize winning playwright. Didn't find many TV credits or anything like that, but yeah, they're giving that another try anyway. But it's only a writing, it's only writing the pilot or whatever the fuck. So who knows if anything will come from it. But it shows how House of the Dragon, as you said, must be a sort of moneymaker, or at least, some sort of cash dragon that they're like, wait a minute, maybe we should make more of this because this news is coming out now,
So when he made that blog post, was he just inundated with people screaming, "Go write the fucking books, you piece of shit"? Like, stop.
Yeah.
Like, we don't care.
Of course, as with every post, but I think he's well beyond caring about that. So, yeah.
I mean, does he have like children? Does he have a son or a daughter or something?
Yeah, he's got Jon Snow. That's basically his son. He's got Arya. That's his daughter.
Well,
I don't know.
Well, because what's going to happen is it's just he's going to pass away, and then his like shitty kid is going to be like, I found the manuscript. I'm going to finish it for dad because dad would have wanted it, and it's not going to be good.
Yeah, they'd give it to Brandon Sanderson. And I love Brandon Sanderson. That's what they did with Wheel of Time. I do love Brandon Sanderson, but he would not be the right person to write the final book at all. He doesn't even like Game of Thrones, but that's regardless, Jim, regardless. I think I should tell you very briefly about Bridgerton Season 3 Part 2.
Ooh, wait.
What TV shows have you been watching? Tell me, I gotta know.
Now, real quick, from an outsider, I'm seeing that this actress who is not the cliche body type is getting a lot of controversy or hate. People saying that they were photoshopping her waistline on the show, or they were trying to keep her from doing sex scenes or something or other. So, I mean, this is just an outsider. These are the headlines I see. Is there any truth to this matter?
I haven't seen any of those headlines. I've seen Nichola Coughlin handle any and all comments relating to her body with much aplomb. One example was someone was like, at like an interview. It wasn't even an interview. It was some sort of Q&A or press thing or whatever. Someone was like, "Oh, it takes you have to admit it takes a lot of bravery for someone like you to, take your clothes off or whatever. And she was like, yes, it is. It's very hard for people with my body type, people with perfect breasts. We just don't see ourselves represented enough on television. And the crowd went wild, rightly so. So because it must be such a bore answering the same fucking questions about that shit over and over, because there are sex scenes in it. They're hot. She's hot. And I enjoyed them all. so there you go. And you'll be happy to hear I've officially finished a season of Bridgerton. You were appalled that I'd sort of skimmed my way through previous seasons and checked out when I was like, I can see where this is going.
So wait, did you finish all of part 2 of this latest release? How many episodes were there?
4 in the first part, 4 in the second part.
Damn.
What?
Look at you. Did you watch 4 in like a day?
More or less. Nichola Coughlin's really hot. What can I say?
So what's the verdict?
I enjoyed it, and I would be quite happy if the show just ended there. It's clear that it's not ending there. There's storylines being thrown out that will have some sort of continuation, and it's a very, very successful show, so I'm sure they'll make more. But from the outside, it's kind of like Gossip Girl in sort of Regency times, right? It feels like that storyline, which has been a very central one, is kind of wrapped up, or at least like finishing the phase it's been in for the first 3 seasons, and that was kind of where I was the most interested as well. So to me, it would be a decent. I don't know if I will probably check back in for season 4, but I don't know if I'll finish it, Jim.
Yeah, you already finished. You got that post-finish clarity. You can't watch any more Bridgerton now. Are you kidding me?
Maybe there's certain scenes I'll rewatch. Maybe.
I mean, they'll give you enough time between seasons. You'll be ready and amped to go by the time the next one premieres.
Great. Yeah, I was surprised. I mean, so what have you seen exactly, Jim? Because all I've seen on my algo is praise for this wonderful performance.
Honestly, I've only seen the discussion around the actress. I haven't seen anything about content of the show outside of that.
But what is the are people doing the cliche like Homelander fans? Why is there a woman on there, or why is there a woman who looks different on there, or their photo? I don't know that they're doing any of that. They have corsets because it's fucking Regency times, so I don't know if there's any photoshopping.
Because it's weirdly almost the other way where they're like, oh, they're trying to hide her body type, and it's like fake diversity or something. But she did say something
she's
like,
literally naked
corsets.
on the show, though, so I don't know what that's about.
Yeah, that's what I think her response was that, like I wear a corset, like it does change your body a little bit or something like that. Let me see if I can find the headline real quick.
Yeah, just interesting because it seems like a bonkers. Like the fact that... Yeah, I don't know. It's great. It's a good season, I thought. But the interesting thing is, I'm saying like it could end there, but it might just be that Bridgerton plays with a lot of tropes, right? It takes like classic romance tropes and just does it in this setting. And it plays with characters and whatever. And it's just like the certain cocktail they had this season of the characters they chose, the tropes they had going, that was just the right mix for me. And I finally got like, I've watched previous seasons, but I wasn't like, oh, this is interesting and exciting. Now I was like, so it's scratching that very specific itch of the types of tropes that I like. So I think that was part of why I liked it.
Yeah, Nichola Coughlin's Bridgerton corsets whittled her waist so much trolls think she's photoshopped. But yeah, I mean, Photoshop wouldn't even be the right phrasing for editing in a video. I saw some trolls. They were like, they photoshopped your waist. And I was like, no, they did not. The 37-year-old actress said, explaining it had to do with historical dramas, Regency-era costumes. It's just, I mean, these are just
nothing
classic
burger of a
clickbait.
story.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I was going to say, it's just classic clickbait. It gets people riled up no matter whichever, point of view you may have on it. She was on Dairy Girls. I've heard of that show.
Yeah,
was it you that told me about Dairy Girls? I think
probably.
It was.
Most likely. I sense a PowerPoint in your future, Jim.
Yeah.
But yes, I don't really have more to say about Bridgerton other than, I enjoyed it. It was good. It was hot.
What's good to hear. And that was season 3, part 2, or season 4, part 2?
3.
Season 3, part 2. So how many episodes total do they have? Are the other seasons 8 episodes as well?
Who knows? I didn't finish them.
That's
but
true.
I think
you just
I think they
bounced.
were. I think they were like 10 each.
Yeah,
I
you just
believe something
bounced.
like. I feel like every show is 10 or 8 episodes now, isn't it?
Yeah. Usually it's like 8 to 10 episodes, and then they take 2 years to make.
House of the
which-
Dragon season 1 was 10 episodes. The second season is 8 episodes, for example.
Which it used to be like super impressive when TV looked like films, like they look like feature films. You're like, oh my God, like this looks like a blockbuster movie. But it's past it's like diminishing returns on giving them leeway to take as much time as they take to make these shows. Because it's also been a while, so we're almost just used to it. And you think back, I mean, again, this is our discussions always harken back to like in my day, a TV show ended in May and they had new episodes in September. You know what I mean? You took the summer off, then you were back ready to go in September through like December. Then they took a little break and then they were back in February through May. What the fuck? And they had 20-something odd episodes. You kidding me?
And it's probably only going to get worse because of like writer's strike backlog of things that haven't come out yet. And also, interestingly, I mean, we're not going to get into it just yet, but I did read an interview with showrunner of The Boys, who was also showrunner on Supernatural, right? So he was talking about, or the interviewer was asking him about like the difference between back in the day versus now, and he was saying very similar things to what you're saying, that like if you bring in writers now who haven't really done anything and then just give them like an enormous budget and 10 episodes to do a thing, they're not going to appreciate it the same way he did. He was like working really hard to make more with less, and just kind of doing things in a really rushed way. And he was saying like, I'm never going to be stressed really doing things this way, or never as stressed. There's always things on fire, there's always things that need doing, but I'm never going to be as stressed as when I was making 22 episodes every season, and starting the next season immediately after the first one and continuing on. And that just gave him a sort of baseline skill level of how to make a show that allows him to elevate it now. And he was talking about, even before the writer's strike, he was making sure any writers he was working with, they were all coming to the set. They were all like getting those things that writers were asking for to get them involved in the process, to actually understand how that interplay between what an actor can do, what their strengths are, how to incorporate that, all those things that you get because you're making a show week to week, so that you're like fucking pedal to the metal. You're not going to be able to go back and if you have an idea and put something in episode 5, because that's already airing when you're making like the season finale or whatever, and just comparing the two. So just something that came to mind because he was literally talking about that same thing.
No, that is interesting. I mean, well, and a quick side note, I guess, before we get in, we'll get into The Boys in a second, but also they did announce how season 5 is going to be the last. The season 4 just premiered, which is probably smart because, as you kind of mentioned, he is the creator, showrunner of Supernatural, which initially was planned out for 5 seasons, and it went on for like 16 or something crazy, 15, 14, whatever it might be. And it fucking sucked. I think he did leave the show after 5. Like, he's more like a producer at that point. I shouldn't say it all sucked after 5, but it definitely was all like, I loved that show. And I think around like 11, I was like, hey, I'm tapping out. I can't do this anymore. But real quick.
What TV shows have you been watching? Tell me, I gotta know.
I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but definitely have some more eyebrow raising about the Acolyte after Acolyte episode 3. Now, I don't want to be that guy. I know, like, there's a goddamn culture war going on, much like The Boys, with the Acolyte right now. And I think there's false flags on both sides involved in this. But my biggest issue with this new episode is more so that it was boring and goofy. Like, that's what I said to you. I said it was goofy and boring for no reason. Number one, in my opinion, and again, I'm not going to judge it too harshly, although I kind of am, because we're
Sorry,
still
can
in
I cut? Let me cut you off, Jim, just to give the context without spoiling it. So the third episode's just come out, right? So the first two episodes, setting up the plot and everything. The third episode, no spoilers. It is a flashback to what happened 16 years ago, which is a big mystery in the first two. And it's still a big mystery because we don't really find out what happened. We just get a bunch of context of these two twin characters of when they were younger. Go ahead.
Correct. Yeah, thank you. So again, I'm not going to be too harsh, although maybe I will be, just because again we're still in the midst of this mystery, so there still could be some payoff, but I have less confidence because at least in my opinion, with the knowledge I have now, it feels way too early for this episode.
Yeah.
To have this flashback because we're only just getting to know both Osha and May. I mean, there was even some discussion on if they were the same person when we were discussing episode 1 and 2. Again, that's probably more on us than it is anything else, or Jacob, I should say. I never thought they were the same person.
Me neither, but I still think they might be.
Yeah, true. So we already get into this whole flashback episode, and don't get me wrong, I understand it's very hard to find children actors. There's
apparently I watched Avatar: The Last Airbender, the Netflix show. I should say I not according to your rules because I didn't fucking finish it, and it was mostly because of Aang. Now the show wasn't that great to start with, but the actor who played Aang was a child. And it's a very difficult role. It was fucking terrible. Anytime he was talking, I was like, I'm so brought out of this. They give him he has the most like speeches about destiny lines, and he's a child, and I'm like, he needs to be, I don't know, a lot younger to be able to pull off not doing any acting at all. I don't know. Sorry, go ahead, May and Osha.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's even harder to find twin, because I assume they're twins or they're at least related. I'm not trying to shit on kids here, but they're not very good. They're not very good on the show. They're not, and especially with the amount of weight they need to pull, especially in these heavy flashbacks. I feel like that's why if you did this maybe a little later, an episode or two later, where you could already have the main actors building some of these backstories a little bit more, or have you wanting to root for these characters in whatever different ways more, they wouldn't have to do as much heavy lifting, but I didn't think they were very good. Like, I'm not against getting weird. Like, I'll say this does get a little weird. Like, I guess I'll say witches are not new to Star Wars. There are witches in some other lore. I mean, I'm not that familiar with, like, Rebels or Clone Wars or whatever. But from my understanding,
that other bullshit.
Yeah, from my understanding, there are some witches involved, I think video games or something. So I'm not really, I don't know. That plays a part in it. But overall, it's like we spend this whole episode as a flashback instead of just even using pieces of this. You know, do the Lost thing, have a thing going on in our main timeline and maybe show pieces of this, because we spend all this time in this flashback, but it's still, like you mentioned, it's still a mystery. There's still things that it just adds context more than it answers any questions. And if anything, it kind of it poses more questions. So it definitely knocked things down a little bit. I'm still going to watch it, and I'm still hoping, like, hey, you know what? Maybe there's some method to this madness. Maybe something will pay off. But I at least saw where some of these other people that were pretty negative on it were coming from, especially, and this is the biggest problem with taking things like this and having to continue to do prequels and build in different canon, like, but also have it fit with existing things we already like. Like, they're kind of breaking lore that was already there a little bit. So I don't know. We'll see. I definitely I was a lot more hopeful coming out of episode 1 and 2 than I was coming out of 3.
I feel you on that. Now, as to prop up a false flag, I feel like people have hated on the episode so much that I almost turned defensive, you know? But then I'm also like, this goes on both sides. On this one, it's not a great episode of television, whichever way you spin it. It feels like an attempt to show, don't tell, but it does the exact opposite, kind of. Because it's not an entertaining story. That episode on its own doesn't tell, like, it doesn't tell you a fun or interesting story. It is just setting up the mystery further of what happened back then and why do these two characters think that the others died, and all this stuff that we won't get into because we're not in the spoiler zone. I haven't heard a rap or anything, so I won't get into it. But no, yeah, I think what she said about it is a bold move to do a big flashback episodes, but that feels like and honestly, it's even not a bad idea in theory to have it early on in the season, because it's like, let's get this exposition stuff in there, let's set it up for the plot that's about to happen. But just the fact that it's kind of like, it feels like a backstory. It doesn't feel like a story. It feels like, that's the part of the character that you hear about that you don't necessarily even need to see. And more annoyingly, it's not resolved. So we're going to come back to this and see other people's perspective of these same events, because we know things didn't play out exactly the way that we've seen. Now, what would be interesting is if maybe they do something where someone else is telling the story and it's literally different, do that old unreliable narrator thing. But because we're not in a flashback, we're not in that sort of looking at someone's face, then we go into the past. They almost can't even do that, because it's like, this seems like an objective, let's leave the story and go and look at what happened 16 years ago, which could work. I just feel like with the bad acting from the children and the general not resolving what happened, it's like, okay, I know, and now I know this stuff, but I didn't enjoy that episode as much as episode 1 or episode 2. So hopefully the downward trajectory of my enjoyment won't continue,
For sure. And which kind of it ties almost into
What TV shows have you been watching? Tell me, I gotta know.
what we've both been watching, The Boys, because like these shows, and it's like a chicken and an egg situation, because I feel like these shows live and breathe off of a culture war. Like, don't get me wrong, there are shitty people that don't like these shows for shitty reasons. But I also feel like the people that make these shows and market these shows, they lean into it, because then it almost, like you said, you feel bad also being like, well, this is bad sometimes, because they're like trying to put you in the box of like, well, you're clearly a Nazi fascist. That's why you don't like The Boys, because you think Homelander's a good guy. So The Boys, they literally do things like this in the show. Like, there's running things about conspiracies and false flags. They literally rip things from like headlines and Twitter and whatnot. My problem with The Boys is that I feel like this show is too dumb to think it's so smart.
Sure.
Because it's like, I don't necessarily mind that they play with like extremely online things, but maybe it's because I'm extremely online that I tend to roll my eyes at it, because I'm like, oh yeah, they're doing the VOD on ice. That's like the Jenny Nicholson Christ Marvel thing. Like, they're doing a takeoff of that. Like, so it's not even like an original idea, really. They're taking a thing that was already a meme, but then they're throwing in the old meme of Happy Holidays instead of Merry Christmas. And then they're tying it all up in a, gore fest of a CG gore fest, even, of an action scene to like put a bow on it. I think the strongest things about this show are clearly Butcher and Homelander. Like, there's interesting stuff there. In these 3 episodes, there are so many fucking subplots happening. And this show also suffers from, again, 2 years disconnected from the last season. But I guess in their defense, but also to their detriment, a spinoff aired last year, which you almost kind of had to. I did watch. And they're like, well, you don't need to watch it. And I guess you kind of don't, but they are referencing things from the spinoff a little bit. They did announce that it's going to be the last season, which I think is a good thing, in season 5. But they've also said they're going to do more spinoffs. So it's almost like a fucking, it's like a, I don't know. There's no balls to saying, hey, we're going to finish this up, because you're not going to finish it up. You're going to bleed it dry like The Walking Dead. So I'm very mixed. I don't know if you're picking this up or not, but basically I'm mixed on this show. But I guess I'm always kind of mixed on this show. I appreciate what it's doing, but I feel like the show, and maybe this is me reading this into it and it's not there, I think they think the show's more important than it actually is. That's my thoughts.
Yeah, I actually have some sort of notes that I jotted down that are not exactly the opposite, but I did write down that I was shocked at how good they were at getting me back into it, because I didn't open this up going like, oh, I'm so excited to see the boys, which is maybe more my problem than anything. But I watched Bridgerton first, as I mentioned. But I was like, because I feel like it feels like at this stage in The Boys, we're kind of retreading a lot of ground. Like we've already seen a lot of this stuff. We know what The Boys is. We know what they're gonna do. And given that, I was surprised at how entertained I was overall. I do agree there's some storylines where I'm like, well, I don't care about this part at all, which is okay. But what I wrote down as well was that what it lacks in subtlety, it makes up for in entertainment value. It relies some on shock and gore at times, but I think it does so in a way that is hopeful. Like, I totally hear what you're saying about it thinks it's way too smart, but I feel like that balance so far hasn't tipped over for me in this season, where in previous seasons I've kind of reached some points where I'm like, okay, I guess we got to have an orgy and we got to just keep topping whatever the ridiculous thing is from the previous season, but it hasn't struck that yet. Now, as I said, what it lacks in, it has no subtlety at all. It's, fantasy and science fiction is supposed to be a funhouse mirror of our world. This is very much like A to B. It's not it's not doing any sort of, you don't have to think to figure out who Homelander is supposed to be or who these characters are supposed to be or what it's trying to say about what's happening in our society, specifically in the US. But with that said, it's not worn out its welcome with that for me yet. I'm like, okay, this is still interesting enough to me, and the sheer entertainment value of seeing some guy multiply himself by 8 and eat his own ass, and then you see a fight scene with him later on, and kind of it's all ridiculous and over the top. I did enjoy it. I haven't been enjoying it so far. Don't give a shit about what Frenchie's up to. Sorry, Frenchie. I'd have no idea what the thing is from the previous season. Don't remember that shit at all. Don't really care. And there's a lot of storylines I feel that way about. But overall, I am enjoying it.
Yeah, I mean, this is a show that says something like critical soup theory when they're talking about a thing. Like, this is also a show that, like, they have Conspiracy Con, which I get, and it's like the people you see online that have these conspiracies, but it also, our heroes are part of a deep state trying to kill the vice president. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? Like, or even like they do a take on The Blind Side with like A-Train being in this white savior movie, but then Mother's Milk, our black hero, like every episode he wears a hip hop shirt. It's just weird, some of the things that they do. And I mean, if it's all a goof, then I guess I get it. But I don't feel like to them it's all a goof. I feel like, and again, this could just be me reading into it more than they're attempting to do. Like, I think they think they're like really kind of breaking this stuff down. But you're right. It's super entertaining. I mean, if there's one thing The Boys is going to do, it's going to show you a guy's cock. Like not every episode, but at least a few times a season, you're going to see a guy's cock. Now, did House of Dragon have a guy's cock? I haven't seen. Did season 2, episode 1 have a guy's cock or no?
I don't think so yet in this one. So I'm pretty sure there would have been one in the first season, but you're going to have to watch it to find out, Jim.
And I guess, to be fair, it may not have been till the second or third episode. So I'll give House of Dragon a little bit of catch-up time.
It was some leeway,
to show a guy's cock. But yeah, I don't know. Like I'm not going to stop watching or anything. I do like it. But I also, it's to tie it back to what we were talking about, they play into it a bit where, Eric Kripke's like, his big quote was like, go watch, if you like Homelander, go watch something else or something like that, which I guess I get. Like, yeah, I don't think he's just saying that, but it's, I don't know. There's this weird culture war that pops up with these like nothing properties, whether it be Star Wars or now it's at least The Boys is talking about these things literally. I guess Star Wars is a little bit as well. But it goes back to like I'm sure before Lady Ghostbusters, but Lady Ghostbusters is a big one where, in a weird way, you know, you kind of almost don't want to like shit on things because then it's like, what are you, some sort of alt-right fucking Homelander conspiracy nut? I mean, don't get me wrong, I love the Miss Maisel bar mitzvah or whatever it was that they busted into.
So that is a scene. This is not a spoiler, but at one stage they bust into from one function room where there's a conspiracy sort of convention into another one where there's a bat mitzvah that's the marvelous Miss Maisel themed. And for me, I had a moment where I was like, oh yeah, this is on Prime. Like they're both on Prime because no other streaming platform would ever do a marvelous Mrs. Maisel fucking reference. And I thought it was just going to be like a fun visual thing because it's like the marvelous miss and it's like whoever's getting bat mitzvah or whatever. But then it's like it's almost incorporated into the story to a degree where you're like, that was in the script. And I'm like, I mean, I love the show, so I get it. But it was definitely a surprise.
Yeah. It was like the marvelous Mrs. Rachel, which was funny because it did throw me through a loop for a second. Because the actress that plays Miss Maisel is Rachel Brosnahan. So I was like, are they literally just talking about the actress? But I had subtitles on, and like the girl whose bat mitzvah it did say Rachel, like when she was like screams because, I don't know, a thing happens. I don't want to say any spoilers. But yeah, I guess
probably something violent knowing the show, you know?
Because, I mean, talking about the things, I'm laughing. I'm like, yeah, this is fun. This is whatever. I do wish they didn't use as much CG blood, but that's just show things, budget, whatever. Like I'm a big gore hound, so I do like gore, but I like actual like in-camera prosthetic stuff. But I'm sure that stuff's harder or more expensive to do. But yeah, I mean the biggest things more come down to like the subplots because we got things going on with Huey, which seem to kind of go nowhere, but I guess they're planting seeds. There are things with Kimiko that, again, I feel like were set up in the previous season, but I don't remember. And same with Frenchie. I think these things were set up at the end of last season, but I only vaguely remember. The Deep's always fun to watch. He's got his thing going on with creatures from the ocean. Yeah.
The Deep is more entertaining than any of those other subplots, if we're being honest. I have to say also, like, I care about Butcher, I guess. I don't give a shit about the kid at this stage.
I don't.
It's interesting how they managed to actually have someone who has, like, a voice that is consistently breaking, like actually sound like a child in the middle of puberty, which is interesting. But children, as we say, can't act. This one's better than a lot of the other ones we see, I guess.
I totally thought his voice was dubbed.
I think it might be. Or is it? No,
it might be. I mean, I looked it up, and people. I didn't double check, but people on Reddit were like, "No, I watched an interview with him, and it's similar." Although they did say it sounds like he's putting it on a little bit, but he does kind of have a high voice. But it's not so much the kid; it's more so how not like the actor himself or the character itself. It's more so how it affects Butcher and Homelander.
He's a MacGuffin, really. He's not. He doesn't have much of a personality, like most children.
Because the way, kind of basic theme. I mean, I guess if you think this is a spoiler, but I mean, just like Homelander is almost going through like a midlife crisis, and it's kind of interesting to see Superman going through a midlife crisis, and it's tackling the idea of. I mean, I'm not a father, but. Maybe this is a common thing where when you're going through your midlife crisis, you're almost like bitter against your son for having like the youth on his side or something, or all the hopes and dreams that you could have had. I guess we see it play out with just in general father-son relationships when they're like, I want you to do better than me, son. And you're pushing him to be a fucking baseball player or some shit because you couldn't be a baseball player.
So he wants his son to be him, basically. He wants him to be... because that's a way that he can live forever. And that's a very classic way of writing father-son dynamics. But, elevated in this case as everything is in The Boys because people got superpowers.
Well, what's great, though, is he wants him to be him, but then he also doesn't want to give up the spotlight. So it's interesting how that plays out.
Homelander is always interesting to watch because he's such a dark and psychotic character, and the performance is so unique, I think. So definitely one of the big pulls to the show.
Yeah. Yeah, and they hint at it a bit because I don't know if you watched Gen V. Gen V was much better than I expected it to be. I remember I was like, ugh, this boys spinoff, and I just kind of threw it on, but I kind of got into it. But yeah, one of the big things to come out of that, which is vaguely referenced in this show, is that there's a like a virus.
Compound.
Yeah, there's a virus that kind of can target soups, and it could be a way for us regular folks to fight back and destroy the soups with a virus.
Yeah, but you kind of got to have one of them at some stage, right? So this is season 4. Next season's going to be the 5th and final one. In the interview that I read with the showrunner, which was actually made before the news was announced that the 5th season is the last one, they were asking about if he knew where things were going, like kind of comparing it to other shows and asking, on a spectrum of how much you have planned out versus how much you're kind of going with the flow, where are you at? And the answer was in the middle. I'm kind of in the middle. He said he has a good idea of where he wants the characters to land, as in kind of the 6 months later at the end of the show where their endpoint should be, but hasn't like concretely decided upon what is the climax going to look at like right before then, So I just thought that was kind of interesting given that we're talking now about this season. As I said, it felt like the show hasn't really necessarily been treading water, but it has... the mission of the show has been to kill Homelander for the last 3.5 seasons, and we've had a lot of close calls. Are we going to get there? There's absolutely no fucking way we get there this season because next season is the last season, right? But it's kind of like, hopefully they are able to not just do a season and leave things off, but to build things up to the last one, but also have this feel satisfying. So far with the 3 episodes I've watched, I feel fairly positive.
Unless they do the thing where, Homelander dies in the finale and then the last season is kind of like an epilogue of sorts of like, well, who, you got what you wanted, but what does that mean? Is it actually the devil you know better than the devil you don't know? But who knows? We'll see.
Yeah, but I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
Yeah. They would do that if he, died in season 5, episode 3, Game of Thrones style. And then it's like, oh, the last few episodes were shit or whatever. Or the real monsters were us all along, We were the deep state. Drain the swamp.
I mean, I was almost going to say the other HBO show that did a thing like that, but I guess that would be a spoiler, so I'm not going to say it. But it could be an HBO show. Does that narrow it down? Yeah, I mean, I guess you're a little bit more positive than me. I don't feel like I'm negative. I just feel like I have kind of some issues with the show here and there, but I'm still on board, ready to watch.
I think I have had all of those same issues with the boys in the past, and I might get to that point in this season. I'm just not there yet, I guess, because I agreed as well on the storylines, which ones are interesting, which ones are not. So we'll just have to kind of see. There's a few things that have been going on that they gotta just kind of resolve, I think. And I look forward to seeing how they do it. And yeah, I think this is another one we'll be continuing to check in, much like the Acolyte and Bridgerton and whatever, as the season progresses over the next few weeks.
Yeah, I mean, one plus side of the new TV paradigm that we've kind of referenced, even though like the downside is sometimes we'll have 2 years off between seasons, is we don't have an off season like we used to. It used to be summer was like doldrums of shows. Like shows didn't premiere. It was usually reruns, maybe a reality show or a game show or something would start up in the summer. But now with like on demand and streaming, it's almost like you space your shows out on purpose. So you could regularly have, these are pretty big shows with pretty big fan bases, both premiering here in the early summer. So it's
fun. The summer of shows. I've been saying it, like looking at June this whole year. Well, I guess I haven't been looking at it in that much detail, but whenever I check like what shows are coming out, it's like, oh, House of the Dragon is coming out at the same time as The Boys, at the same time as Bridgerton, another massive show, and there's a bunch others coming up as well. That the Bear, of course, which I'm sure I'll probably watch some more of soon.
You gotta.
Like all of these. summer of shows or something more snazzy we can put in the title of this podcast is what we need to come up with, really, because it really feels like things are firing on all cylinders. I'm in Sweden. We were going to take this week off, and I looked at the schedule and I was like, I actually can't. We can't take this week off. So much is happening, Jim, which is a lovely feeling, really, because that's this is the time we're gonna miss. Next year when all these shows are like gone, and we're like, when is this coming back? 3 years from now?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I guess that about does it. What do you think? What are your takes on the blood and cheese and blood of House and Dragon?
Yeah, which
of the
again,
Dragon.
I googled that after, and because we're not in the spoiler zone, I was just like, okay, people cared about. I feel like people are acting like they cared about this book before. It's a fucking history book he wrote. It's a spin-off history book. It's not even written dramatically. It's just like quotes and bullshit. You don't care about the plot of this. So maybe you can be disappointed in this show, but I refuse to believe that anyone is out there like, oh yeah, Fire and Blood or whatever the fuck the book was called, that's actually better than the Game of Thrones books. No, it wasn't.
No way.
Come on. This is just I enjoy the show because we're actually seeing something that feels new, even if it's drawing from that. So, and even though it's a prequel. So I don't think, if anyone's saying like, this is going to be more epic than the Red Wedding, and then afterwards they're like, it wasn't as epic, I'm sad now. It's like, you're watching this show wrong.
Or what'd you think about The Boys, and what are you looking forward to in the summer of shows? Hit us up, showswhatyouknowshow@gmail.com. Like and subscribe on YouTube, and drop us a goddamn review on your podcatcher. Anything else, Jacob?
Yeah, before we wrap up, I'm going to do a little visual treat for everyone.
Oh,
I have
nice.
behind me on the wall an actual Shows What You Know fan art piece from erstwhile Shows What You Know listener Matthias Pilhede. Thank you for your fan art. It's been reincorporated into some of our art throughout the years, and I have it up here on the wall in my home in Sweden. So just thought I'd show you that. You can find it at youtube.com/showswhatyouKnow.
That rocks. Thanks, everybody.
We are Shows What You Know. We'll always watch TV. And if you think we can't, we'll watch more and you'll see. That's why the people of the web believe in Jim from Las Vegas and Jacob from Sweden.